Hello, friends. Welcome to library. We have left off with Flora and Ulysses. Um, remember the squirrel that got sucked into the vacuum cleaner and came out with a superpower. And Flora's father has come to pick her up, and you can tell that her mother's not very friendly towards her father. Um, but she goes to open the door, and her father is there. So that leads us into chapter 16, Victims of Extended Hallucinations. It was not her father at the door. It was Tutti. Tutti Tickum, said Flora. Tutti stepped through the door and into the living room, and then she stopped. Her eyes widened. What in the world? She said. Flora didn't even bother turning around. She knew what Tutti was looking at. That's the little shepherdess, said Flora, the guardian of lost sheep and light, or something. She belongs to my mother. Right, said Tutti. She shook her head. Well, never mind about the lamp. She took another step closer to Flora. Where's the squirrel? She whispered. Upstairs, Flora whispered back. I've come to check to see if what I think happened yesterday actually happened, or if I'm the victim of an extended hallucination. Flora looked Tutti in the eye and she said, Ulysses can type. Who can type? Said Tutti. The squirrel. He's a superhero. Tutti said, For heaven's sake, what kind of superhero types? It was a good and also slightly disturbing point. How exactly was a typing squirrel going to fight villains and change the world? George, shouted Flora's mother. It's not Pop, Flora shouted back. It's Mrs. Tickum. There was a silence from the kitchen, and then Flora's mother came into the living room with a big fake adult smile plastered on her face. Mrs. Tickum, she said, what a lovely surprise. What can we do for you? Tootie smiled a big fake adult smile back and said, Oh, I just came to pay Flora a visit. Who? Flora, said Tootie. Your daughter. Really? Said Flora's mother. You came to see Flora? I'll be right back, said Flora. She ran out of the living room and through the dining room. What a truly extraordinary lamp, she heard Tootie say. Oh, do you like it? Said Flora's mother. Ha, thought Flora. And then she was out of the dining room and into the kitchen. She ripped of the typewriter out of the typewriter and looked down at the words. They were absolutely not a hallucination. Holy begamba, said Flora. A loud scream echoed through the house. Flora took the paper and shoved it down the front of her pajamas and ran back into the living room. Ulysses was sitting on top of Marianne, or rather, he was trying to sit on top of Marianne. His feet were scrabbling to gain purchase on the little shepherdess's pink-flowered lampshade. He paused in his efforts and looked at Flora in an apologetic and hopeful way, and then he returned to wobbling back and forth. Oh, my goodness, said Tootie. How did he get in here? Shouted Flora's mother. It just came flying down the stairs. Yes, said Tootie. She gave Flora a meaningful look. Flying. It absolutely scared the living daylights out of me and Mrs. Tickum. We screamed. We did, said Tootie. We screamed. There's just no end to the excitement. If that squirrel breaks my lamp, I don't know what I'll do. Mary Ann is very precious to me. Mary Ann? Said Tootie. I'll just get him off the lamp, okay? Said Flora. She put out a hand. Don't touch it, screamed her mother. It has a disease. So there's Ulysses trying to balance on the shepherdess, the prize lamp of Flora's mother. The doorbell, as if it were echoing Flora's mother's advice, buzzed its terrible warning buzz. Flora and her mother and Tootie all turned around. A small voice called out. The voice said, Great Aunt Tootie? Chapter 17, I Smell Squirrel. There was a boy at the door. He was short and his hair was so blond that it looked almost white. His eyes were hidden behind enormous dark glasses. In addition to terrible things can happen to you, the Illuminated Adventures of the Amazing Incandesto regularly featured a second bonus comic entitled The Criminal Element is Among Us. The criminal element gave very specific pointers on how to never, ever be fooled by a criminal. And one of the oft-repeated dictums of the criminal element was that the best way to get to know a person was to look him directly in the eye. Flora tried to look the boy in the eye, but all she saw was a reflection of herself in his dark glasses. She looked short and uncertain, like an accordion in pajamas. "William," said Tutti, "I told you to stay put." "I heard screaming," said the boy. His voice was high and thin. I was concerned. I came as fast as I could. Unfortunately, on the way over here, I had a small but extremely violent encounter with with some variety of shrub, and now I'm bleeding. I think I'm bleeding. I'm pretty sure I smell blood, but no one should be concerned. Please don't overreact." "This," said Tutti, "is my nephew." "Great nephew," said the boy, "and I hope I don't need stitches. Do you think I need stitches?" "His name is William," said Tutti. "William Spiver, actually," said Tootie's nephew. "I prefer to be called William Spiver. It distinguishes me from the multiplicity of Williams in the world." He smiled. "It's a pleasure to meet you, whoever you are. I would shake your hand, but as I said, I think I'm bleeding. Also, I'm blind." "You are not blind," said Tootie. "I am suffering from a temporary blindness induced by trauma," said William Spiver. Temporary blindness induced by trauma. The words sent a chill down Flora's spine. Seemingly, there was no end to the things that could go wrong with human beings. Why hadn't terrible things can happen to you done an issue on temporary blindness induced by trauma? Or, for that matter, one on extended hallucinations? "I am temporarily blind," said William Spiver again. "How unfortunate," said Flora's mother. "He's not blind," said Tootie, "but as of this morning he is staying with me for the summer. Imagine my surprise and excitement." "I have nowhere else to go, Great Aunt Tootie," said William Spiver. "You know that. I am at the mercy of the winds of fate." "Oh," said Flora's mother. She clapped her hands. "How wonderful! A little friend for Flora." "Oh, a little. I always wanted to have a little friend," said Flora. "Of course you do," said her mother. She turned to Tootie. "Flora is very lonely. She spends far too much time reading comics. I've tried to break her of the habit, but I'm very busy with my novel writing, and she is alone a lot. I am worried that it has made her strange." "I'm not strange," said Flora. This seemed like a safe statement to make when someone as truly profoundly strange as William Spiver was standing beside her. "I would be happy to be your friend," said William Spiver. "Honored." He bowed. "How lovely," said Flora's mother. "Yes," said Flora, "how lovely." "The blind," said William Spiver, "even the temporarily blind, have an excellent sense of smell." "Oh, for heaven's sake," said Tootie. "Here we go. I have to tell you that I smell something out of the ordinary, something that is usually not smelled within the confines of the human domestic sphere." That means their home, said William Spiver. He cleared his throat. "I smell squirrel." Squirrel! Confronted with the spectacle of William Spiver, they had forgotten about Ulysses. Flora and her mother and Tootie all turned and looked at Ulysses. He was still on top of Marianne. He had managed to balance himself on the small blue and green globe that was at the center of the lampshade. "That squirrel!" said Flora's mother. "He's rabid, diseased. He's got to go." Chapter 18, A Scientific Adventure. "Why don't you let me take the squirrel?" Tootie said to Flora's mother. "I'll just return him to the wild." "If you can call the backyard the wild," said William Spiver. "Hush up, William," said Tootie. She reached out for Ulysses. "Don't touch it!" shrieked Flora's mother. "Not without gloves. It has some sort of disease." "If you could just get me some gloves then," said Tootie, "I'll pluck the squirrel off the lampshade and whisk him out of here and set him free. The kids can come along. It will be a scientific adventure." "It doesn't sound very scientific to me," said William Spiver. "Well," said Flora's mother, "I don't know. Florabelle's father is coming to pick her up for their Saturday visit. He'll be here any minute now, and she's still in her pajamas." "Florabelle?" said William Spiver. "What a lovely melodious name." "It will all take just a minute," said Tootie in a low, soothing voice. "The kids can get to know each other." I'll get you some gloves, said Flora's mother. And so now, here they were, walking over to Tutti,'s, getting to know each other, or something. Tutti had on a pair of dishwashing gloves that went all the way up to her elbows. The gloves were bright pink, and they glowed in a cheery, radioactive sort of way. In Tutti,'s gloved hand was Ulysses. Behind Tutti was Flora, and next to Flora was William Spiver. His left hand rested on her shoulder. Do you mind, Florabelle? He had said. Would it trouble you terribly if I put my hand on your shoulder and allowed you to guide me to the back to Great Aunt Tutti,'s house? The world is a treacherous place when you can't see. Flora didn't bother pointing out to him that the world was a treacherous place when you could see. And speaking of treacherousness, things were not in any way progressing as Flora had planned. She had envisioned Ulysses fighting crime, criminals, villainy, darkness, treachery. She had imagined him flying, holy bagumba, through the world with her Flora Buckman at his side. Instead, here she was leading a temporarily blind boy through her own backyard. It was anticlimactic, to say the least. Have you released the squirrel yet, Great Aunt Tutti? No, said Tutti, I have not. Why do I sense that there is more going on here than meets the eye? Said William Spiver. Just keep quiet until we get back to the house, William, said Tutti. Can you do that? Keep quiet for a minute? Of course I can, said William Spiver. He sighed. I'm an old pro at keeping quiet. Flora doubted very much that this was true. William Spiver squeezed her shoulder. May I inquire how old you are, Florabelle? Don't squeeze my shoulder. I'm 10. I am 11 years old, said William Spiver, which surprises me, I must say. I feel much, much older than 11. Also, I know for a fact that I am smaller than your average 11-year-old. It may even be that I'm shrinking. Excessive trauma can retard growth. I'm not certain, however, if it can cause actual shrinkage. What was the traumatic event that turned you blind? Said Flora. I'd prefer not to discuss it right now. I don't want to alarm you. It's not possible to alarm me, said Flora. I'm a cynic. Nothing in human nature surprises a cynic. So you say, said William Spiver. The word cryptic popped into Flora's head. It was preceded by the word unnecessarily. Unnecessarily cryptic, said Flora out loud. I beg your pardon, said William Spiver. But then they were at Tooty's house. They were walking through her backyard and into her kitchen, which smelled like bacon and lemons. Tooty put Ulysses down on the table. I don't understand, said William Spiver. We're back at your house. But I can still smell the squirrel. Flora took the paper out of her pajamas. She handed it to Tooty. She felt like a spy, a successful spy, a triumphant spy, albeit a spy in pajamas. What's this? Said Tooty. It's proof that you aren't the victim of an extended hallucination, said Flora. Tooty held the paper with both hands. She stared at it. Squirtle, she said. Squirtle? Said William Spiver. Keep reading, said Flora. Squirtle, said Tooty. I am Ulysses, born anew. See? Said Flora. What does that prove? Said William Spiver. What does it even mean? The squirrel's name is Ulysses, said Tooty. Wait a minute, said William Spiver. Are you persisting that the squirrel typed those words? Yes, said Flora. That's exactly what I'm positing. The hallucination extends, said Tooty. What hallucination? Said William Spiver. The squirrel as a superhero hallucination, said Tooty. Surely you jest, said William Spiver. Ulysses sat up on his hind legs. He looked at William Spiver and then at Tooty, and finally he turned his eyes to Flora. He raised his eyebrows and gave a full look of questions, full of hope. Flora felt a pang of doubt. He was, after all, just a squirrel. She had no proof that he was a superhero. What if there was some other explanation for those words? Also, there was Tooty's disturbing point to consider. What kind of superhero types? And then she thought about Alfred, how everyone doubted him, how no one except the parakeet Dolores knew that he was incandesto, and how no one except Dolores truly believed in him. Was it Flora's job to believe in Ulysses? And what did that make her? A parakeet? Let me get this straight, said William Spiver. You, a self-professed cynic, are positing that the squirrel is a superhero. The words, do not hope, instead observe, flitted through Flora's brain. She took a deep breath. She brushed the phrase away. That squirrel typed those words, she said. Well, said William Spiver, whose hand was still on Flora's shoulder. Why didn't he move his hand? Let's just approach this scientifically. We'll put the squirrel in front of Great Aunt Tutti's computer and we'll ask him to type. Again. Oi. So, Flora, who's trying not to get her hopes up about having a squirrel as a superhero, but just the things that keep happening are getting her excited about the possibility of Ulysses being a superhero. And the fact that she is absolutely enthralled with the Incandesto comic and how an ordinary janitor became a superhero by falling into the Incandesto cleaner. So, William Spiver seems to be a bit quirky, very super smart, and I don't know what kind of trauma can cause temporary blindness, but I'm dying to find out. I'm really curious. I hope that you guys are enjoying this, and I hope you have lots of questions as we're reading, because I sure do. I wonder what Tutti is going to do with Ulysses, and are they going to be able to keep Ulysses, and will he type on the computer as they're trying to put him on the spot? So many questions. So stay tuned for our next reading of The Great Incandesto, Ulysses and Flora. Thank you for reading with me. Next time.